Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette, and we're so glad you're with us on this episode of Stay Curious with none other than Nick Thomas, I call him the astronaut wrangler out there at the Kennedy Visitors Complex. Nick, how you doing?
Good to see you again, Mark.
Great to see you. 35 years of working for the center and so forth. Quite an exciting week that we had.
Oh, has it ever?
How did that compare to some of the Artemis launch compared to some of the weeks you've experienced in your 3 decades, almost 4 out there?
Incomparable.
Really?
Just absolutely remarkable. I was up on the Astronaut Memorial Hill with the general public watching the launch, and the first reaction was seeing the sky light up the way it did, and people were just flabbergasted. And then when we got shockwave at about T plus 30, T plus 40, everyone just absolutely lost it. It was just unbelievable. It was quite simply a sound that no human ear had ever heard before, and we were there to hear it. We could see it all the way through SRB SEP and all the way over the hill with the 4 main engines.
Yeah.
So it was an excellent experience. And I'd sent off some first impressions to some of the astronauts, and I said that she was faster than a Saturn V, but slower than a shuttle.
Was that your observation, clear in the tower?
Yeah, and some of the guys backed that up to the point that that the fact that the shuttle was so much lighter than the Artemis stack, so that would account for the fact that she was slower than the shuttle. But nevertheless, no matter how you cut it engineering-wise, it was a beautiful sight, and it was a great time to be there.
Nominal. Boy, that
Straight
was
down
good to
the
hear.
line,
Yes.
just as advertised, every step right down the hack. We had a few small problems that were psyched out later on, but otherwise a flawless launch, and one for the books.
Yeah, absolutely. Marty Winkler, a co-producer here, he's seen every launch since he came down here in the mid-'60s or early '60s. Marty, we were on the West Coast. We were west of the pad over there. We didn't really feel the vibrations and stuff over here.
It's funny because I spoke to my wife. She was in Titusville at the time, and no one outside the immediate ring felt the shockwave. Now, that could have been a result of air density, wind direction, and humidity. And those 3 factors always have a bearing on the sound of the shockwave.
Yes.
So for this one, we were actually very isolated in terms of the sound of the shockwave, which was very unfortunate. I just wish everyone could have been as close as some of us were that night.
Well, I talked to Mike Leinbach, who was on the LCC, Launch Control Center. Look at me with these NASA acronyms. And he said it was the most fabulous launch he'd ever seen, and he only was seen all the shuttles and everything. Yeah. Closer you were. He was there with Pambo Melroy. And
good.
And he said it was only about a dozen of them up on the LCC. Small group.
Yeah.
Bob Seek was there.
Good.
They cut.
Well, they went down.
They cut Charlie Blackwell Thompson's tie on there. And I talked to Seek about it. He loved it. So we're so glad that everything is nominal. It was And now the Artemis generation's got something to hold on to, right?
Yeah, this is something for them to hook on to inspire them and to inspire their efforts toward career in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So great moment several ways around.
Well, that's 2 baby boomers that we're going to be talking about 53 years ago when America doubled down on President Kennedy's pledge to go to the moon, of course, landing Apollo 12. I'm trying to think of where its location was, next to the Surveyor spacecraft.
Ocean of Storms.
Oceanus Procilium. Ocean of Storms.
You got Latin on me now.
I got some Latin. That stargazing Latin goes out there. But nobody's thinking about it. Like we discussed a little bit in our pre-production discussion, nobody remembers Nick, the second one, to do anything.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of an American trait. Once you do something the second time around, people tend to lose interest, which is unfortunate.
As I like bringing up, who was the second person to cross the Atlantic Ocean after Charles Lindbergh's? That propelled him to fame. It was 5 years after Lindbergh did it. And you all know this person, and it was Amelia Earhart.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? The next person to solo across the Atlantic was the most famous aviator of all time. So we're going to talk, though, today about this Apollo 12. Like I said, Nick and I were baby boomers in our teens at the time. We do want people to know that we got a short week planned for you of Stay Curious. We've got Mr. Thomas here with us today. Tomorrow, Terry White is going to talk about the shuttle garage and specifically the, again, return to orbit of Columbia that happened in November 1981. And then the one and only Mr. Hugh Harris, voice of NASA, will be on here Wednesday. And Hugh is working on some Thanksgiving in space stories for us.
Right. You know, you've got two of my most important mentors up there. You got Terry White, who's taught me everything I would ever want to know about operations in the OPF. And Hugh Harris, who, to my mind, is one of my exemplars when it comes to announcing these live events and shuttle launches and so forth. So my hat's off to both of those guys, particularly Terry with his bulletproof mustache.
Yeah. Well, thank you. This is, and you're part of this, Nick, that we are reaching a different audience with this Stay Curious program. And we are so blessed to have like 3 A-list people here that want to contribute to our humble nonprofit museum, and of course you all speak high things of our museum and what we're doing here. And the next big thing we're going to be doing is a shuttle fest again in April 16th. We got the date, we got the Hilton, and you are people important to bring in the A-listers so that our space community can enjoy hanging out with our shuttle astronauts again.
Yeah, you bet.
So here on the Space Coast, I know there's a lot of activities in Houston, but
we are the cradle of the manned spaceflight program.
That's right, the cradle, exactly. Yeah. And we're just 9 miles away from it there. This is what the Astronaut Wrangler does, and boy, I know you enjoy it when Kathy Thornton's in town.
KT Thornton, KT is just remarkable. She has so many great stories. She brings such a unique perspective to the whole process, particularly being an EVAer for 2 of her flights, one of them very critically, the STS-61 mission, the first repair of the Hubble Space Telescope, and she brings a great viewpoint and dimension to those stories. She really is a remarkable lady.
She is. She looks like she's selling Avon today, just such a beautiful, humble lady. And I mean that in a good way.
A sexist would say.
The sexist would say, well, there's men selling Avon too, maybe. I'm just saying she's like Eileen Collins and some of the others, just so unassuming,
so relaxed,
to what they went through.
Very relaxed. She enjoys talking to the people, and the people enjoy talking to her. And she just, as so many of the astronauts have, she has that personality that just lends itself to opening that discussion, even if it is just for a few moments. So we enjoy working with KT.
But this is what it's all about, the families, their kids, moms and dads, showing people real astronauts.
And so many kids.
You never stop smiling when you're out there.
Well,
Nick.
You hear so many stories. You know, we brought our son here for his birthday. Or we brought our daughter here because she loves space and she loves astronomy and so forth. And you learn these personal stories every time a family steps up to that table. So it's always something to enjoy. It's always something to treasure, and it's always something to look at when you're looking at that young person, and you ask yourself, "Am I going to be introducing her on the stage in another 20 years?"
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Exactly. And that's what Nick does. The astronauts come out there and speak twice, in the morning and the afternoon, and then this is the autograph session at noon, and then you have another one around 4 o'clock.
4:15, the second one over at Atlantis.
Atlantis, right? In there. So, because we're doing Stay Curious, I've not caught that. I need to catch that on the weekdays. Marty, you were just out there today. We're kind of hooked on going out there and supporting you, Nick, and seeing these great stories of these astronauts. Who'd you hear today, Marty?
I forget his first name. Is it J.R.?
James
Riley.
Jim Riley.
Yeah, he's Apollo. Apollo. He was a shuttle, I think 92, 104, and one.
Pilot or special?
Mission
pilot. Then he became a spacewalker, which I thought was unusual. I asked him about that also.
Good. Well, I can't wait to go out there tomorrow. Or Wednesday will be my last opportunity before our Thanksgiving holiday here, though. But you do have these astronauts come through the holidays, though the center's closed.
Yeah, just a heads up, we will be closed on Thanksgiving, and we will be closed on Christmas. So,
okay. And I know Fred Gregory's going to be here. The general will be here around Christmas time. If you're
Fred Gregory will be
vacationing
with us.
here, he's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
And then you've got
Fred will want to thank you for that promotion, by the way.
who?
Fred will want to thank
good,
you. He is a
good.
colonel, not a general.
Oh, is he a colonel? Oh, okay. Doggone it. Well, he should be a general. All the good stuff he's done as Space Shuttle Commander, and he was acting director of NASA for a few months, I understand there. So, yeah. And, well, we're going to talk about Nick. We've already talked about the Artemis. There's a great shot of you out there. It's off the pad.
Oh, beautiful vehicle. And I'm glad it's off to a good start, but I miss having her out there.
Yep. And the next one's being ready to go. What are they telling you that you can share about?
Right now, I spoke to, last week, I spoke to a couple of folks from Mishu, and they're currently in the process of attaching the aft engine compartment to the core stage. So that's in work. And here at KSC, we have the service module from the European Space Agency for that next Artemis mission. And she's over in the ONC building undergoing her inspections and verifications before we begin integration operations with the spacecraft itself.
Great. Because that other service module hung around here for a couple years.
Yeah, quite
they
some
got
time.
It on there.
Absolutely.
I remember seeing that about 5 years ago on a tour out
But the
there.
good thing was we knew that was certified hardware because that hardware, not that specific service module, but that technology had flown before on the European ESA's cargo vehicle. And that was the system of propulsion for the European cargo module to the space station.
Okay. Well, knowing Nick was going to be on the show today, I ran across this unusual photograph, Marty, that, Nick, what do you think about that? I'm going to share when this happened, and we've got it labeled for you too, folks, here.
Yeah.
In fact, I teased our Facebook page to watch the show today, if you're curious about who people are. Of course, you can usually pick Dick Gordon out with the white shoes and the flashy. We're going to talk about Dick Gordon here.
Overall, you're looking at a salute to the fashions of the 70s in this picture and the hairstyles and such.
This photo was taken on the steps in front of the headquarters building, #1 at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston. Many of these astronauts had left NASA and had moved away on August 1978. In fact, the date was August 21st, 1978. They gathered for an event organized by Chris Kraft, who was center director at JSC at the time, for briefings on the shuttle program. Several of the Apollo astronauts who are missing from this photo were active in the shuttle program or perhaps involved in briefings. And they include John Young's not in there, nor is Fredo Hayes, Al Bean, or and T.K. Mattingly are in that picture. So, but here are the people in this picture, and I got this off Wikipedia Commons, and the people in white were moonwalkers. Armstrong's in there in the back row there. That's kind of a coup for him to be there. The people that just orbited are not outlined, and those that didn't go to the moon, you see on the left there, McDivitt's hard to read.
Walt Cunningham.
And Walt Cunningham. And then you got, they do honor Grissom, White, and Chappie there, which I love that. I hate seeing the Apollo mission logos without the first one being Apollo 1, Nick.
Well, more and more I'm seeing Apollo 1 added as being the first flight. Yeah.
Good. That's just an oversight on a lot of things there. But there you got Edgar Mitchell, a good friend of our museum beside Alan Shepard there. But you ever seen that photo before?
Oh, yeah. I have seen that photo before.
Okay, well, you've seen a lot of them. I thought I could trick him there, Marty, and show him, not trick him, but show him something he hadn't seen. Interesting photo, though, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah, it's such a good thing to have the reunion of those fellows on that day. Just a reminder to us that time is finite, that people will not be with us for all time. So whenever we had the opportunity to get these folks together, it was always a good idea. And you can imagine the stories that were being told around the table during those get-togethers.
Absolutely. And just looking at there, Duke's alive, Scott, not many others in there alive in this group. Walt Cunningham's right there, isn't he, beside the Collins? Yep, that's why we love doing these programs, Nick, on Stay Curious, because there's several generations now that don't know these guys
Yeah.
as heroes like we did, and just dying for any morsels of information about these flights back in the 70s.
Well, it's like for you and myself, our generation, we were not alive at the time of Lindbergh's flight, and we felt a little jealous of the people who were alive at that time, and to hear their stories about what it was like to experience that remarkable flight. So we are to the future generations. I think they're going to look toward people like us to keep that knowledge and, more importantly, that spirit and enthusiasm alive, to spread it out amongst the newer generations so they can accept the torch and move forward with it.
Amen to that. But we're going to talk about these guys.
Yeah.
That you know a few of them pretty well. I don't. I've just read the history books. But folks, if you ever want to make sure that you know who Pete Conrad is, just look for the guy with the gap tooth. All right. Or if you're around, could hear somebody, probably be hearing him before you came to him. And of course, that's Dick Gordon and Al Bean.
Mm-hmm.
Both were rookies with the experienced Gemini pilot there. And liftoff was November 14th, 1969. They landed on the moon November 19th, 1969. So on this date, they lifted off the moon and were headed back. But you know, everybody kind of knows them looking like this, and I'm going to kind of shut up a little bit as I let you talk about this crew. That I have here a very interesting pencil sketch of the guys. That there's so many numbers that go with the missions. This one says 507.
Have no idea what that means.
Isn't that the Saturn V number?
It might very well be.
Because
but
that's a tip off that this is out of Marshall. All right, not Houston or Kennedy. This is
Marshall would have called the mission by its rocket name.
NASA Michoud Assembly Plant in 1969. Was 507 the number of the
It might very well have
Saturn
been,
V
but
rocket there?
off the top of my head, I don't know.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. There's always numbers that trail everything out there
vehicle.
in there. So
Now, the guys as we see them here, Pete Conrad to your left, Dick Gordon in the center, and Al Bean on the right, gathered around one of their Corvettes, right? Gold, naturally, Navy gold. But Dick and Pete had flown together before on Gemini 11. And the great thing about these guys was that Pete was the instructor for both Dick Gordon and Al Bean at Patuxent River Naval Air Station, where the Flight Test Center was. And then I believe Dick went on to serve as an instructor at Pax River as well. They were probably the three of the closest friends to fly in space. They were a unique combination. And noted not only for their sense of precision and engineering expertise, but also for their ability to have a good time, to have a lot of fun. And just three remarkable people and a very remarkable crew all together.
They are, and everybody loves them. Marty, we got a little glitch.
I know, but you hit something that caused me to have an edit, transitioning live. I don't know how to get out of it.
Well, let's see here. Well, there we go. Well, you didn't know how to get out of it, but we got out of it. Now,
So you're out of it.
Can we get back to pictures? On pics?
So now I can't get anywhere. I can't transition from the left. This can't transition.
Okay, little snafu here. We'll figure it out here in a second.
This is like the color camera going out on Apollo 12.
Yeah, right.
I think this is the curse of Al Bean that's hitting us now.
Exactly. Doggone it.
But that's okay. We can get through that.
What we got? No, we need a few pictures. Let's see here, Marty. What do you think would be a fix? I don't know what I hit accidentally. Control. My control's over here. I'm going to look and make sure. Oh, hang on. All right. Well, I'll let Marty try to work on that a minute there.
I have no idea.
Go ahead and talk about.
What did you do that got rid of the picture?
I didn't do anything.
Okay. Let's see. Well, let us talk while Marty's trying to figure that out there. About this landing was the second one, of course, after July, and we had the, of course, Neil Armstrong had this wonderful comment that everybody says that he came up with on the way to the moon. One small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. But what was the second guy on actually the third guy that walked on the moon?
Well, Pete Conrad came up with an idea, and in fact, he was talking to an Italian journalist by the name of Oriana Fallaci. And Oriana Fallaci was a what you'd call an investigative journalist. She kind of had a hard edge going for her.
Uh-huh.
And Pete told her what he was going to say when he when he first set foot on the moon. And Oriana Fallaci said, "Oh no, NASA will never let you say that." Pete says, "You want to make it interesting?" She said, "Yes." And I bet you $500 that I get to say what I'm going to say. So he told Oriana Fallaci what he was going to say. And sure enough, on that day of the first EVA, Pete came hopping down the ladder onto the footpad, and he said, "Whoopee!" He said, that may have been a small one for Neil, but it was a long one for me. And sure enough, he said it, and it got out there. We all remember when it happened. And Pete never really collected on that bet from Oriana Fallaci. She welched on the bet.
Welched on the bet.
Is what I'll say.
Yeah.
But Pete made that effort to make the point that NASA was not going to censor anything that they had to say on the moon, and they didn't. And point taken, and $500 not collected.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody thought, well, the NASA public relations and stuff going to put words in their mouths and all that sort of. You're involved with that, and then I've talked to Mr. Harris about that. He basically says NASA didn't have time for all that. Okay. In fact, we, I'm Associated Press graduate, so to speak. We're critical that NASA is not that good at capitalizing on some things they could.
Well, I think that NASA needs to stay within their lane,
Okay.
and poetry is not within their lane. You leave those words to the people who are making the event happen, and if they have something to say, I say you let them say it. I've seen since throughout the shuttle program, and I've spoken to the astronauts about this, that all the PAOs, particularly KSC, feel the need to say some kind of lofty phrase as the vehicle leaves the rocket.
Yeah.
And you didn't have that with Jack King. Jack said the tower's clear, and that was it.
Yeah.
So for my money, I say leave the poetry to the people who are performing the feats. And I think as pilots, that poetry is going to be short, sweet, and to the point. No flowery speeches. Just here we are, and here's what we've done. Now here's the next case.
Well, that what pops into my head is John Young's famously saying after the famous speech to him on STS-1.
Yeah.
That's a mighty
fine speech. And you didn't have to say anything else. That made the point.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but good point there. And I kind of the Artemis, whoever was saying whatever they said, I go, all right. Everyone's got to add their own little spin to it.
I will point out here, because I can.
Mm-hmm.
That I think the NASA PAO in Houston for the Artemis launch did one hell of a good job of narrating that ascent. She's Lynn Cheshire.
Okay.
She stuck with the altitudes, airspeeds, velocities, and all the technical numbers, and didn't ball it up with a lot.
Yes, she did. I did watch that.
She was in the mold of those guys who used to call the launches for Apollo from Johnson Space Center. Pure engineering, right to the point, boom. And I really admired her job that she did that.
She did do a good job. There was a guy that talked right at liftoff.
Now that was the KSC PAO.
Okay.
And just like the vehicle, the KSC PAO hands off to JSC PAO as soon as we clear the tower.
That's right.
So it's a similar line of demarcation.
I'm not going to get into it, but to me it was refreshing because I kind of felt the whole commentary up to the launch was a little bit of a chatty party and not so much about the objectives and so forth.
Well, again, we are baby boomers, and I suppose that this new generation has to have something else to key them off on all this stuff.
Well, they had their own fashion designer with their Artemis clothing.
We're
Mr. Thomas.
We're just a couple of old farts, and we accept that. We understand that. And as a matter of fact, we take pride in it, and we revel in it.
That's right. Here, it did. I'll take 5 like that for that there. Exactly. Well, we solved our little image problem. Don't know how. Don't care. Thank you, Marty. There is LM number 6.
Number 6
on the moon there, and proud to know my friend Marty walked around all that thing. He's got his He says, don't say I have my fingerprints on
No,
there
no.
because I wore gloves,
That's
all
right.
right? But just think of that, what Marty can look at these pictures, Marty, and you built it, you helped build this thing. What do you think about that? Bragging on you there, Mr. Winkle.
Well, yeah, I helped. But I just like to point something out, though. But I find it a little bit interesting. That's the landing probe right there.
Okay,
And
5 foot.
And people ask why we took the landing probe off of the front landing gear.
Yeah.
Well, you can see how an astronaut could be backing down the ladder and could bump into that probe and puncture their suit.
We're looking at the rear of the LEM there,
Yeah.
quads 3 and 4. Marty's taught me. No, 2 and
Yeah, 3 and 4.
3 and 4 there.
No, I'm sorry, 1 and 2. 1 and 2.
And there's the and then we've got of course we didn't point out our green screen is of course the Earthrise from Dick Gordon took that photo, who we're going to talk about in a moment. There's the probe. Great that you said that, Marty, about that. Point out the engine bell there, please, sir, or whatever you want to point out. And why did you have to put this foil all over everything?
Well, it acted as a heat temperature barrier. Okay, it kept it a little bit warmer when we were on the dark side in the shadow, and it kept it a little bit cooler when we were facing the sun. It also acted as a micrometeorite shield because the foil was 25 layers thick, which isn't very thick, but it was still 25 layers.
And I forgot to ask you, you had a couple sheets of that for sale in our auction Saturday. Does that, can you buy me dinner this week? Or what?
Yeah, I could if I wanted to.
Yeah, of course. Did you do pretty good? I didn't follow the auction this year.
Yeah, my Apollo 12 foil went for $425. Oddly enough, Apollo 17 should have gone for more, but it went for $425 also.
$425 for about a foot square of this stuff. Not even that. 8 inches.
Well, the Apollo 12 was 4x4. The Apollo 17 was torn apart, so there's all different sizes. The biggest one's about maybe 6x8.
Well, good for you. Once again, Marty was a electrical engineer, lead engineer on the Grumman staff here, about 1,200 workers from Grumman, Bethpage, New York here. Interesting thing, a story I heard from one of their, who was the pad leader who passed away, Marty?
It was Cal Mosier.
Cal Mosier. You ever run into Cal Mosier?
No, I haven't.
In the old days. He said he worked Mercury and Gemini on the pad out there. And then he said, everybody's laid back, Florida, surfing, all that kind of stuff. Then when all these 1,200 New Yorkers from Long Island showed up, he said the level of noise in the VAB and everywhere just tripled.
That it did. It was like
They're yelling at each other, throwing things at each other.
Hearing those voices about like it's like a bagel and a bucket of grits, as a friend of mine used to say.
There you go. There you go.
We didn't really yell at each other, throw things. They just talked loud.
Yeah. Well, but Cal was saying that.
We would
Bless
fly
his
paper
heart.
airplanes off the top of the VAB, inside the VAB.
Paper airplanes. What a great shot of Pete Conrad going down off the porch there, down the ladder.
Yeah.
Of course, Bean had to have taken that shot. There's the probe, the 5 foot blue little light went on there. And we got the back of the probe there we talked about. Oh, I'm going the wrong way.
You're going the wrong way.
Going the wrong way. Well, all right.
Looking
Can't
for
see these
number 8.
enough.
Looking for number 8. There we are.
So talk about what's on the moon there a little bit with us, Nick.
Yeah, that's the ALSEP. That's the Apollo Lunar Science Experiments Package. A series of experiments all tied into a power source, which was an RTG generator, a radioisotope thermal generator that provided power. And I think they anticipated those experiments would stay alive for the better part of 2.5 to maybe as much as 5 years. But you had usually you had a commonality of experiments there. You had a seismometer to detect any moonquakes that might occur. You also had the laser range reflector on the first 2 or 3 missions. There we are. And the LRR, the idea was after the guys had left, you would shoot a laser beam up toward that target, and it would reflect back from the moon, and it would give you the exact distance between the moon and the Earth, which is a changing factor. But it was also an opportunity for other nations, if they should decide they wanted to check this information out, they too could use the LRR. And in fact, several other nations have utilized that LRR, and that's pretty much proof across the board that we didn't fake this thing. Because
Right,
if we
yeah,
had, somebody
that's another good
somebody
point.
would have found out by virtue of that laser range reflector.
Well, if we did fake it, I want the money that Marty made back. Okay, the reparations for what these people are living off of now. All right.
Well, we've had abundant proof from several different international sources that
Yes,
those
we
landing
have.
sites are there, and that it was a done thing.
And but you know, now we just got to get past the flat earthers and think that.
Well, you know, it's several guys have told me people are going to believe whatever they're going to want to believe, and they're going to believe it to the death. So you just don't waste any time or energy on that.
That's
you
right.
Just press on to the next.
I've heard you
the next
wrangle a
question.
couple astronauts that have said that to their groups there.
Yeah.
By the way, this is a famous, I think, a famous Big Bang Theory sitcom episode where they go up on top of their condo in Pasadena and bounce. They have a telescope up there and bounce a signal off the moon up
cool.
there. Yeah, it's just kind of a fun little show there. That's one of my favorite ones. The girl in that's dating a kind of a not intelligent guy, and he's all flipped out by it. But yep, you can do that. That's up there for your doing. That is actually the beam getting the radioactive thermal isotope.
Getting the RTG out of there, and he's going to drop it in the center hole in that power station you see just in front of him. The multi-fanned power station right there. That core will go into the center of that power station.
You want to know what is available to buy that was on the surface of the moon? Sometimes things like these straps that they grabbed and put in a bag with the rocks came back. We've got a little card, looks like a business card with a little piece of Apollo 14 of that type of safety line in it. And just a little inch piece of that goes for $700, $1,000 all day long on there because it was on the surface of the moon. By the way, the bottom part of this with the legs is still on the moon next to the Surveyor spacecraft. This was a pinpoint landing. We'll talk about that in a second. But while Pete Conrad, who passed away in 1999, unfortunately, in a motorcycle accident, we lost Al Bean 2 or 3 years ago. He was in his 80s.
Yeah.
Dick Gordon, 4 or 5 years ago, they made it in their 80s. But while Pete and Al Bean were walking on the moon, Dick Gordon was making these awesome photographs on a Hasselblad camera of landing sites in the future, as well as information there, and gives us a good segue. There he is in training inside the command module. But so you've got a good story or two to tell us.
I had the pleasure of spending time with Dick Gordon over the years on a number of events, and Dick was one of the most unique personalities you would ever want to meet. He was possessed of a finely tuned, highly focused engineering mind, but he also had a sense of humor that was just out of the ballpark. He could be outrageous. One of the things he would do, and if we go back to that picture, Marty, right there. No, back.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. Now, we're having a discussion there, and there's Jim Riley off to the right, and to the left.
That's Jim Riley, the astronaut's out there now. Okay.
Then to the back, facing his back to us, is Fred Hayes, and then just beyond Fred is Dick Gordon. Now, Dick had this technique of what I call throwing a grenade into the oatmeal pot. He would throw something out into a discussion. And if it was an engineering discussion, it would seem outrageous in a scenario that you'd say, God, that could never happen in a million years, and everyone would laugh. But suddenly, someone in the discussion, usually Pete Conrad, would say, now, wait a second, the animal's got a point here. Let's talk about this.
You call him the animal?
I'll tell you about that later. But they would come up with this engineering point that Dick had made through humor that got everybody thinking about it. And if you think about that as a teaching method, everybody in that group had laughed at it when it was first mentioned. So now they said to themselves, well, I laughed at it. I better come up with some support on this question, which they all did. Now, as a teaching aid, as I say, that was priceless. In a social setting, it was hilarious. And what you see here in this picture, Dick has just dropped a grenade in the oatmeal pot. And the photographer caught it at the exact point where I'm saying to myself, oh, God, I can't wait to see how they get out of this. But it was just one of those like I say, wild hairs that Dick would throw into a conversation just to get everybody's attention and to spur a little bit of conversation. Now he did this to me during a group that we were running, a Q&A group that we were running, and I think that's the picture after next. Here we are gathered together. There's from left to right. There's Jim Riley. There's Walt Cunningham, Fred Hayes, myself, Al Warden, Charlie Duke, Ed Mitchell, and there's Dick on the end. Now we were there to do a panel discussion, and the general public was there to observe it, and they would write out their questions, and the questions would be given to me, and I would read the questions as I received them. So, and I think the next picture is taken at the panel discussion itself as we were setting up. And at one point, I got a question for the command module pilots, for Dick and for Al. And the question was, how difficult was it to transition the CSM nav base from an Earthborne RefSmat or a system of reference to a lunar RefSmat? And before the answer could come up, Dick Gordon said, well, I'd be interested to see how you feel about this. Over to you, Nick. So I'm standing there with egg on my face, and so all I could think to say was, well, Captain, I'm prepared to agree with anything you have to say. Back to you, Dick. So we had that little quick volley, and I think after that, I think I'd earned a lot of good RFG points on that particular exchange. And Dick and
RFG.
Richard Francis Gordon.
Oh, okay.
Richard Francis by God Gordon.
All right.
But I think I earned enough points there. Dick and I just kind of became simpatico as far as our sense of humor was concerned. And he was a wonderful, wonderful guy. He had a little bit, the animal story. What happened was when he was assigned to Gemini 11 with Pete Conrad, Pete's wife at the time, Jane, saw a picture of Dick and said, boy, he's got animal magnetism.
Really?
And after that, Pete would just not let go of it. And every time he was with Dick, he would
I
call him the
imagine.
animal.
Oh, yeah.
And, oh, God, Dick just bristled.
Dark haired. He's a handsome guy for sure.
So Dick was the animal.
Magnetism.
But he was funny. He was smart. He was clever. He had a little bit of the devil in him. He did a bus tour with one of our communicators, and it was her first time to work with any of the astronauts. So their job was to go out on the base, and Dick would tell stories about different facilities on the base and then come back. And knowing Dick as I did, when the communicator came back and she saw me, I think she was still blushing. And I said, well, when are you two going to announce your wedding date?
Jeez. That's funny. That's good. Yeah, they're... And I'll talk about here in just a second, but there is a wonderful newsreel you got to see on YouTube called Apollo 12 Parody. Just put that in. They did a whole 15-minute movie parody, and I know Dick Gordon had a lot to do with it. So did Al Warden had a lot to do with this. It's funny as heck. And one of the stars of the show is our own Hazel Banks. Hazel, hope you're watching. Though I'm mad at her because her Buffalo Bills beat my Cleveland Browns, but everybody beats Cleveland.
Life goes on.
Life goes on is right there. Anyway, we're going to get back on the moon after talking about Dick Gordon there and just follow up just a little bit about Dick Gordon there. He just seems like he was involved in a lot of things and attended a lot of things. One of the astronauts that you could probably count on to be at a charity fundraiser or something like that.
He was a great booster of the Scholarship Foundation. Mm-hmm. He would appear at several of these events, like that panel discussion we had at the Visitors Complex. And he was always there when you needed him. He was a trusty, true blue. I think everyone's definition of what you'd want an astronaut to be. He was a fantastic gentleman.
With animal magnetism. That's interesting. Well, I pulled off a couple pictures of the Apollo 12 that showed a lot of shadows, the shadow people. I kind of like being a photographer. Photographers play with shadows. But the big deal about this mission was a pinpoint landing because Apollo 11 landed almost 3 miles off where they wanted to because of these mass concentrations of gravity in the lunar subsurface called mascons that actually affected the speeded up and slowed down the lander. But there you see the lander, Intrepid, all right, LM6, and the orbiter was called
Yankee Clipper.
Yep, Yankee Clipper, and they had this pinpoint accurate landing right next to the Surveyor spacecraft. I love the two astronauts in the shadows there. And this is what they used. This was the computer there.
Well,
this is a smaller version of it there.
And this was your ground-based computer. Your computer, the AGC on board the LEM took care of all the nav for you. But the guys on the ground who were confirming your numbers, they were using these.
The slide rule, an opportunity for me to show the old slipstick, some of them called it.
Mm-hmm.
And the way people walk around with their cell phones on their hips, engineers had different holsters to hold these babies on their hips.
Exactly.
So it's kind of a cool part of our world there. Ooh, that didn't do too
Some
good.
fragile technology.
Fragile technology there. Like, anyway, they gave it to me to play with, so part of it come apart there. But the Surveyor spacecraft, they went up and took pieces of it.
Mm-hmm.
The Scoop is in the Cosmosphere in Kansas. An amazing picture. But with it, there is a year and a half earlier, they were the tension of the soil was being. You and I remember seeing these pictures and just reveling at them in the newspapers and the magazines. Oh, we're digging into the moon. There's where the Surveyor actually hopped 3 times too when it landed. They discovered on there.
She bounced to a stop.
And the astronauts there, I love that's both of them on the moon. Such a cool artistic shot.
This is also a very important engineering picture because when you came in for a landing, you had to have what they call low beta angles. The sun had to be at your back, a little bit over the horizon, but not too much. Enough so you could determine the craters and gather some sort of depth perception with the lack of an atmosphere. So it was important to have the sun at your back so you could see the depth of the craters in the field that you were headed toward and to find yourself a smooth landing point to touch down at. So this demonstration of the beta angles is very important.
Think the first hour of sunrise. That's when all these landers were, so they could see the extreme. As you know, during noon, you can't tell distances and stuff. So a little bit of levity here when boys will be boys.
When boys would be boys.
When boys were boys on there. They had on their sleeve. Well, you talk about this.
Yeah,
I don't get in much trouble.
You had cuff checklists on your wrists laying out the primary goals of your EVA at that time. And as you look at these pictures, let's look at the checklist on the top. On the left, you see the number of tasks, certain tasks that have to be performed at a given time during that EVA. On the right was a little present from the backup crew.
Yes.
And these images were taken of Playboy playmates, very tame to what people see these days. But back then, you have the model there, glancing enticingly over her shoulder, and as I recall, the caption underneath that was advice to the crew as they were looking at the geology, the land around them, to look closely for the protuberances and take notes.
What's that top one say, Marty? You can read that.
Is that the protuberances up there, Marty?
No, I can't see it.
Okay.
Any missing hills and valleys? Oh, see any interesting hills and valleys.
Yeah.
See any interesting hills and valleys.
So there are all these wonderful double entendres that accompanied these images of the. And when you hear the air to ground, when you hear the crew laughing and giggling, they're showing each other these checklists because they didn't know about them. They just found them on the spot, as it were. And they said, Pete, come over here and take a look at this, and they both start chuckling. So
cartoons were put in there.
This was a wonderful series of in jokes that the Apollo 12 crew enjoyed, and something that I think spoke for its time as to its spontaneity, its hilarity, and I'm just sorry we don't.
And a little shot in the arm of adrenaline, maybe there.
I'm just sorry we don't have that kind of sense of humor anymore.
Yeah,
I get in trouble for saying that.
I'll probably get in trouble for this anyway. Yeah. But it was 1969.
That's right.
These
it was 1969. Deal with it.
These were test pilots, and I'll bet the young ladies were honored to be on the moon.
Well, as a matter of fact, as a side story, 2 of these girls who were in these pictures, they showed up at the post-flight press conference. And the guys recognized them and kind of gave the nod to the security guys.
No way!
And the security guys went over and said, "Ladies, let's step out into the hall here and let's talk for a while." But they were intent upon raising their hands for questions and saying, "Well, how did you boys enjoy 2 days on the moon with us? And luckily, they weren't given the chance to say that. So that's a little side story to that practical joke that almost came back to bite them in the rear end.
To your knowledge, was that duplicated on other missions?
No, not to my knowledge.
I've never seen anything surface about it either. So,
DFCO might have stepped in and
this
said,
is
boys,
the
let's calm
greatest
down.
astronaut crew of all time, Apollo 12, and the fact that Gordon and Conrad were Gemini 11 together even made it for even more special for them, I'm sure. Again, Mark showing off their shadows and stuff, but I just moon shadow to the extreme there. Okay, great song, but it shows both astronauts. That's sort of my cool thing. And what's that stick there in the middle there, Nick?
That would be, I'm looking at here. Yeah, that's the gnomon, GNOMON, or GNMON. I can't remember the proper spelling.
GNOME, yeah.
Yeah, and it was basically to do two things, to give you an idea as to what kind of slope you were dealing with, because the bottom would go toward lunar center, and that would give you an idea of the angle or the slope that this sample was at. And also on the side of the gnomon is a color chart, so they could ascribe the different colors of the sample from that sample sheet on the gnomon.
Though it doesn't translate much in the photographs and in the movies, the astronauts described the surface as quite colorful.
You know, you got so many different descriptions from different crews, particularly from Apollo 8 to the following lunar orbiting missions, such as Apollo 10. And it's been described as a light brown fawn-colored surface. By other astronauts, it was described as a stark gray surface. And I believe all those discrepancies in description were due to the sun angles that existed at the time that the guys were talking about.
But they were in different places, too.
Different places,
so, you know, there's clay in
so
Georgia and sand in
compositions
Florida.
can be different places.
And to the point, that's why we need to go back, Nick. We don't understand it completely. This is our nearest celestial neighbor. We're not sure, but we think it was actually ripped out of the Earth where the Pacific Ocean is because it's a lighter material like the mantle of the Earth. There's not heavy iron ores in it, though there's iron in it. But yeah, another reason to go back and to support the Artemis mission, to go back. And Nick, let's face it, you and I thought 50 years later, there would be bases on the moon like Antarctica swapping out 30 or 40 people a year, right?
And I'm hoping we're going to drive toward that goal soon with the Artemis program, that we can establish a lunar scientific base on the south pole of the moon for a couple of reasons. Number one, that's an area that we know frozen water exists in those craters. The inside of those craters have not seen sunlight in billions of years. So we know we've got some frozen water there that can be utilized for oxygen and hydrogen, for breathing oxygen, for drinking water, for rocket fuel. We can get a lot of different uses out of that frozen water. There is also an element known as helium. Helium-3, that's right. Helium-3, which I personally don't know a lot about, but a lot of people have a lot of excitement about that particular element on the moon's surface. So there are a lot of things that we can do on the moon, on that research station, along with using it as a staging area to learn what we're going to have to learn about the techniques and technologies that we will need on the Martian surface. So the the lunar scientific base serves those two extremely important goals for our future programs.
Absolutely. The last man, the number 12 man on the moon, Harrison Schmitt, he is the second youngest, one of 4 survivors. Charlie Duke's the youngest, I think, at 86. Jack's 86. Maybe they're both 87. Anyway, he wrote a book that's basically about helium-3 and harvesting it all, and how there are all the elements to survive on the moon. With the ice there to make water and so forth. So, but wrapping up Apollo 12 over 50 years ago, another astronaut silhouette there on the edge of Surveyor Crater, they called it. They're pounding down a core sample. They did they did 2 extravehicular activities. The second one's when they went out to the Surveyor. The first one they set up the experiments. In looking out the window, just for the last time, the same windows that Marty looked out when he was working inside the Lunar Module. All their footprints and so forth that are still there, Nick, waiting for Kennedy Space Center lunar bus tours to go there.
And again, the story that I like to tell about Apollo 12, when they pitched over and Pete could look out through the window and see the lunar surface clearly on his approach to landing, his LPD, his lunar pointer designator on his window, was centered exactly in the center of the Surveyor crater. And when Pete saw that, he got very excited about it, as you'll hear in the comm. But he said later on that when he saw that pointer sit right dead in that crater, he said to himself, this country can do anything.
Wow, that is. And Marty, who's happy you mentioned that, because that's one of our favorite landing clips of his 12. Because these two guys are like, Pete's like, there it is! Oh my God, Al, there it is! I can't believe it! What did they call his where he was, his destination, where he was to land? Pete's parking lot.
Oh, okay.
Is what they called it in there. They call it Pete's parking lot. There it is. There's the park. Right next to the craters. I see the snowman craters. Oh, he's so
Pete
excited.
Was excited and Al kept trying to bring him back into the cockpit. Yeah. And you can hear that again on the comm.
That's great. Check that out on YouTube, as you're telling people to watch Stay Curious on YouTube. And the Apollo 12 parody. You're going to love it. You're going to laugh. Three Stooges are even in it, right, Marty? Mm-hmm. In there. So we're going to get him back to Earth. And Nick, I'm throwing this picture in here because I don't recall why Mr. Al Bean has a Band-Aid over his eye there.
Oh, yeah. Well,
this is in the, tell them where this is.
This is in the quarantine trailer on board the Hornet. After they came out of the helicopter, they went straight into the MQF, the mobile quarantine facility. And you see that bandage over Al's right eye. And what had happened was, as they came down to land in the ocean under parachute, although you're under 3 parachutes, you still could hit the water with a pretty good thwack. And they did. And unfortunately, there was a camera mounted in Al's rendezvous window. And that camera had not been mounted tightly down onto that bracket. And as soon as they hit the water, that camera came out of the bracket and hit Al right in the right over the right eye. And Al himself said, for a couple of seconds or so, it was like, "Hello, where am I?" And he kind of lost it for a little bit there, only for a few seconds. But then, of course, afterwards, Pete got him patched up in the CM, and that's where the Band-Aid came over Al Bean's right eye.
Well, I'm smiling out there, UCAC brothers, because I knew Nick Thomas would know the story behind that little Band-Aid over his eye. Amazing! Wow. They'd obviously lifted their visors up or something because they were floating down.
Well, they came down in the suits, but without the helmets and the gloves. They felt comfortable enough to do that. Okay. So the guys were not wearing their helmets at the time they made impact with the water.
Well, I said hi to the UCAC brothers out there because they just got back. They were down here for Artemis and drove back yesterday.
That's great.
And it was Tom's birthday. Happy birthday to you, Tom UCAC. He is working on his...
and a heads up for Tom, I got some pictures coming your way shortly, so be looking for that.
Good. Doug Forrest is watching in Los Angeles. Carlton Bailey. Yep, he got up from his afternoon nap to check you out today, Nick.
Okay.
William Whiting. William Whiting invited us to his condo, one of the new condos across from Titusville High School.
Oh, good.
And we watched the rocket launch there, and he's going to be a great supporter. Thank you for your support, William. To Ben Hughes that's watching.
Ben Hughes.
Give some hellos there for me.
We have Kerry Frank on board with us today, along with Connie McDaniel, Gary Jeriel, Dave Stangy, okay. Yeah. I keep getting.
And Gary Jarrell's a peanut farmer in Georgia.
Ah, very good. Like I say, I'm a good customer of his. Steve Hammer is on board with us today, along with Mark Usiak, Angela Butler, and Daniel DeJong.
And Daniel DeJong is he flies that big Airbus from Detroit to Florida.
Yeah.
He's a pilot, and we love that you're staying curious with us there, Daniel. He's actually married to a Ukrainian woman, and they have a museum that they're trying to get a lot of stuff together from STS-87, which had a Ukrainian astronaut, and Mr. Winston Scott was on that one. And I believe, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Winston was on that one. And I'm trying to remember the Ukrainian's name, but it escapes me right now.
And we fixed him up with some swag that we had here. So we get a little divergent there.
Leonid Danyanyuk.
All right.
That's him.
Leonid Danyanyuk. Good for you, man. threw this in. This is called an insurance cover. Nick, tell us how what this is about.
Well, to the extent of my knowledge of these things, one of the things collectors like to catch are postal covers signed by the crew and stamped for the date of either the launch, the lunar landing, or the return. And I expect that's what we're looking at right here.
Right. The astronauts could not. No insurance company in their right mind was going to insure them. All right. As an astronaut, I'm looking for my notes on something else here. NASA okayed for them to sign these postal covers that would be sold if something happened to them. And what did I do with that? And so I thought that'd be interesting just to throw in there, and you can see there.
It's an especially beautiful depiction of the Apollo 12 patch, and I'd like to point something out on that patch that a lot of people might not know. You'll see just over the Clipper ship there are 3 stars in the sky, and just a little further below in the contrail of the Clipper ship there is a 4th star. Now that 4th star is for Clifton Williams, C.C. Williams, who was a Marine Corps pilot. And C.C. was originally going to be the LEM pilot on this flight, but he was killed in a T-38 crash. So as a tribute to C.C., the guys put that 4th star on the patch.
That's so nice of that. And then the other thing I have here to show is a Robbins medal. And Robbins medals are made, they're only for the astronauts. They're made out of silver. They are, this Robbins company provides them. And my extra notes on that. There's like limited to a couple hundred. Each mission has a different count of them. I can't believe, I know I printed that out. C'est la vie. So what? We'll get through that too in there. Anyway, this is one of the most. How valuable are these? Well, they're around $10,000. Okay, they're that valuable. Made of silver, taken to the moon surface and back. Apollo 13s. There's several out there that are very wanted, but these are worth thousands and thousands of dollars. Okay, Robbins medals, and I can't find my complete thing on that. We can do a show on that before, but. I know collections of people that really revere these, and they're just a handful of them there. To remind you see the Apollo 12 parody on YouTube. Here's the guys, ha ha ha, on the moon with their lunar maps. Like I said, you're going to enjoy it. They landed on November 19th, 1969. Splashdown was November 24th, so they were en route to the moon on this. And we've got what pieces and parts are left, which, by the way, Marty did research that for me. And this is the Saturn tail number 507 is the tail number there on this. Thank you, Marty, for checking that out.
And a quick story on those pictures on the moon, particularly those pictures of the surveyor in the crater. Originally, the crew they took a photo intervalometer with them that they were going to attach to the camera and take a picture of both Pete and Al on the moon standing next to the surveyor. But when the time came, Al looked for the timer and he couldn't find it, so they had to skip it and press on with what they were doing. And later on, at the end of the second EVA, they're getting ready to get back onto the LEM, and Al found the timer inside a bag of rock samples. And he was just so angry with himself for not having found it back at the surveyor crater, they just took it and he threw it away. When he realized later on, he should have taken that thing and set it up on the camera and still gotten a picture of Pete and him with a LEM in the background.
Yeah.
But he didn't do that. His frustration got the better of him, and he tossed that intervalometer off onto the lunar surface.
Yeah, that would, and you know what? Maybe that was a good thing for the lunar conspiracy people. Who took their picture?
Well, the guys would have had an explanation for it, and I don't think the lunar critics or the lunar conspiracists arguments really stand up to very much scrutiny to begin with. So I don't worry about that.
I found my notes, and the lunar Robbins medals are made exclusively for NASA astronauts. The Robbins Company, a jewelry manufacturer, was commissioned by NASA to work with the astronauts on the design of the medals, beginning with Apollo 7. Only 100 to 450 models were created per mission, and they were only available for purchase by the NASA astronauts and members of the Astronaut Flight Office, AFO. And once created, they traveled aboard the astronauts' missions to the moon. And they bought them for about the price of silver at the time. But the launch date, the landing date, return date were all put on afterwards, of course, on there. So that's the 411, as they say on that. Oh, I'm going the wrong way again. So there she rests. The Yankee Clipper at the Virginia Air and Space Museum.
Bless her heart, she survived a lightning strike heading uphill and performed like a champ all throughout the mission.
Quite an amazing mission, quite an amazing crew.
Yeah.
As we pointed out, a color picture of them, obviously seeing their families up close for the first time.
An interesting thing about those caps that the guys are wearing, if you look at the TV, the air-to-ground TV during the mission, they wore those caps, but the caps had propellers on the top. But then NASA PAO said, yeah, you can wear the thing in the MQF, but for the TV, let's go ahead and lose the propellers and let's try to be a little dignified here somewhere. Yeah.
And that was those of you who don't get that joke. That was kind of a joke of the 50s,
beanie copter,
beanie copter hats in there.
I had one when I was growing up.
Yeah. If I haven't seen any of those backward hats everybody wears now, that would be something in there. Well, golly, another great program with Nick Thomas, as usual. Such interesting things that we've learned about space history from you, Nick. We certainly appreciate you being here today. There is the Earthrise of Apollo 12, 53 years ago or so. Nick, put a button on it for us here.
Well, I love that closing shot of the Earthrise, because imagine yourself as an Apollo astronaut having that in your memory file and being able to draw upon that anytime you wanted to. There's a great art in taking these pictures, but as astronauts have told me, they've been counseled by astronauts who've flown before them and say, yeah, take your pictures, but don't miss the opportunity to simply look at the beauty of where you are and just register that in your mind. And he said, I guarantee you that will stay in your mind a lot longer than a photograph that you take. Subsequently, when I watched launches back during the Apollo program, Saturn V launches, I only photographed one launch, and that was the launch of Apollo 11 for history's sake. Mm-hmm. I've since lost those pictures, but for the rest of them, I didn't take a camera with me, and I didn't take a camera to the Artemis either. I wanted to register that whole thing in my mind using the standard issue Mark I eyeball, and that's what I did. And I've come away from that launch with some great memories.
Good advice out there. You can get too obsessed with it. Yeah. The eclipse, the great solar eclipse, I kind of got too involved taking photographs and wish I had been just like my friend Bob Smith, just sit there and enjoy it. I enjoyed it and so forth, but there's something to be said about there's a lot of people that record these things around you. You can bum a picture off somebody for sure. But good advice there, Nick Thomas. Enjoy the moment, soak it in with your own experience. Background, and it's awesome.
There's no better memory in the world
than your own there. So we got some great memories of a great week. What a dynamic week it was around here too, Nick. We thank all the friends that stopped by. I met Cynthia Rossi. Hope you're watching today. Met her at our Mob Museums of Brevard. Cynthia, nice talking to you yesterday. Nick, the energy of our museum just goes up a level like we've never experienced before, and we're so grateful for people like yourself promoting us. We had a museum full of friends all week, and it just means so much to us.
Well, speaking for people like myself, we are grateful for the opportunity of meeting the people associated with the museum here. I had the pleasure of spending time with Tom Usiak on my last visit, and he and I are going to be engaged in some photographic correspondence here shortly.
Good.
I was able to reconnect with Carlton Bailey, one of my earliest friendships that I made out there on the OPF and at the launch pads. It's great seeing Carlton and being in touch with him again, and the opportunity to meet so many more people who are associated with the museum as we continue to expand this network, if you will, of people who believe in the program, who love the program, who want to share the program with others, and also want to inspire a younger generation to follow our trail and to press on with carrying the torch into the future.
Thank you. A good way to end our program here today.
And that's the dullest speech you're going to ever hear for the rest of your life.
Well, We appreciate all that you've embraced here at the American Space Museum, Mr. Nick Thomas. We enjoy coming out there and watching you do your astronaut wrangling. He is awesome to watch in the game, as you told me one day out there, because you got a lot on your mind. I realize that out there. You book your vacations down here this winter. Make sure you come to the visitors complex. All right. It is $75 to come in, and that's not that much money here on the Space Coast. You're going to see, and my arms are raising already, the hair, just thinking about Atlantis and the reveal of that. And it's just so worth it to talk to an astronaut. And Nick, you do such a great job with the whole program. It's something to not be missed out here on the Space Coast. So, Marty, we have anything to finish up today with our friends watching Stay Curious? Again, we're going to have a short 3-day week out there. Let me put up there our meme for the next tomorrow. We're going to have Terry White on board. There you go, Mr. Terry White, manager of the orbital processing facilities, done speaking like all the time to dignitaries, and Mr. Hugh Harris on Wednesdays. So, Nick, thank you very much, sir, for another great program.
Thanks for having me.
And until tomorrow when we have Mr. Terry White, I'm Marquette saying we can't wait to see you again to what? Bridge the space between us.